Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special episode of The Fifth Meeple. We are a group of diverse friends who offer our takes on the latest and greatest board games to hit our table. Each of us has a different tag that we identify ourselves by based on our personalities and our play style. I'm your host, Daniela. I'll call myself the Goofy Noob, and join here today with the Intellectual Introvert.
Hi, everyone. This is Chris.
And the Collector.
Hey, this is David.
All right, guys, today's special episode is all about our experience in making a board game podcast. But before we get into that, David, what is our topic of discussion for today?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Daniela. Today's conversation topic is one that's near and dear to my heart. It's all about, do you buy used board games? This is a topic that I think goes across the board gaming spectrum, but a lot of it is I used to never buy them, I guess is how I'll say this, and then I got into it a couple years ago, and now I almost exclusively buy from other people. Yes, I do occasionally visit my local board game store and stuff like that, but a lot of the titles that I'm buying are from other people directly. So I was just curious, have you guys ever bought used board games? And if you have, why? And if not, why haven't you gotten into that yet?
Yeah, I would say for most of my board gaming time, I was a board game snob. And it wasn't that I was like, oh, I'm never going to do that. I just never even consider it. I would be worried about missing pieces, not in good shape, whatever the case may be, until I played Maracaibo and I had to have it, but it was like $80. And I'm like, well, I don't know if I need it that bad, but I really want it. And so I started looking at alternate sources, and I think you pointed me to BGG and look at the market there, the geek market. And I got it for $25 used, but really, really good shape. And it's like there was absolutely no reason not to get that. And so that kind of opened my eyes to still, I would be a little iffy about, like, I don't want to go out and just buy a game anywhere. But that was a really good deal. And again, for 1/3 of the price, just as good as new, there was really no reason not to do that. And so that opened my mind up to, okay, there's a whole other world out there of opportunity.
I think that's interesting because I think all of my games are probably secondhand used, unless I was gifted them, I will say. I probably have maybe 2 to 3 that were gifted to me that were new, but all of my finds have been like that whoa moment that I found something at either half price books or something like that, where I've even picked up games I've never even played before, but I'm like, hey, I think I know this designer or I know this person who's done this game, and I've picked it up and played it and tried it, or I bought it secondhand from somebody else who had a deluxeified version or something like that, which is really a good cost for the money being spent, especially because I would assume, David, so for the games that you buy used, have you gotten any games that like don't have pieces in them?
I have not. My experiences have been really good. Mm-hmm. So I say that with a caveat, I want to knock on some wood here or something like that. Because anytime I've ever done it, and I've done it quite a few times, is I've had really great experiences. Not only if I'm meeting somebody in person, sometimes, some of the meetings, I come in as a buyer, but then because I buy so much from somebody, sometimes we end up gaming together. So I think it's funny in that respect. I think only on one game have I been disappointed that I actually got from somebody. It was a hard to find board game. It came in, I think it was from the West Coast. It came in here and I opened up the lid and that person had eaten food or something. And there was like some grunge on it. And I was like, oh, but the issue was, it was an out of print game. So sometimes you take chances, but that was the only time I've ever been burned. Most of the people that I meet when I buy used, and I used to never buy used, I used to tell my wife, it's like puzzles. I'm like, why would I buy used? It's going to miss a piece or something like that. My wife used to buy used puzzles, and I was like, why would you ever do that? Like, I don't understand that. I feel like there's going to be a missing piece. And because she had done it, I was like, well, I guess I could take a chance on a board game. And for me, my journey started with out of print games. I wanted to find something that was out of print that was hard to get. A lot of them are used. So I brought those in, had great experiences with it. And then I've just kind of gone down that path. A lot of times you can find stuff that's new and shrink too, and NIS, as they call it.
And even with hard to find games, I know I was looking through the desert and I was on eBay looking, and you can get on there and someone will say missing one camel or something like that. And you're going to get an out of print game that's really expensive for probably half the price. And if you can forego a camel, like that's okay too, right? If you're willing to miss a piece, okay. Like, or you could sub a piece from something else for the right price. You could probably go
out and print one. If you know somebody 3D printer, just have them print one.
Yeah.
There's the completionists out there that are like cringing as you say that. I'm like,
we just lost a couple listeners.
Well, listen, I'm all about saving the money to buy more. So
you're like, this wooden block is a camel.
I would print a camel and at least make it look halfway decent, but it's still not complete. It's funny, as you were talking, David, I wrote down a couple other games that didn't dawn on me at first, but I have a couple other used board games as well. You mentioned Half Price Books. I was like, wait a minute. One of the first games I bought, Eldritch Horror, was from Half Price Books, and it's one of the games I've played it 80 some times. I love that game. I've been feeling the Call of Cthulhu now. I need to go back and play that game. And then I recently bought Archipelago. I had heard about it on Board Game Barrage, and it just sounded like a neat game, and the way they had described it being played, and lo and behold, I saw it in Half Price Books, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to take a chance on that. Didn't know if I'd had all the pieces, took it home, counted it up, and you know what? I didn't have to punch anything out. Right. So that's the other thing. Some people enjoy punching out, but that can also be a lot of time. And do you really get anything out of it? And this was already punched out. I had to reorganize some things, but everything was there. And again, I got a game I would not otherwise have gotten by just saying, yeah, I'll take that used game for a third of the price.
Yeah, I think I bought a used copy of Gloomhaven for really cheap. I like to bundle my deals. So if you're out there in the used board gaming market, the more you can bundle, the more you can save. But as far as that goes, I didn't have to organize it because I heard organizing it was like a mess. But the guy that I bought it from had organized everything, but then never actually played it. So everything's just ready to go for me now. I didn't have to spend all those times, like Chris was saying, all those hours trying to organize all those cards and stuff.
Yeah, Gloomhaven. My goodness. Yes.
So I feel like I saved money and saved time by doing it that way.
I think the bigger threat is Chris renting games from the library, though, because he likes to return them without pieces.
Yeah, do you have a story there, Chris?
I still dispute that. 225 chits, and somebody counts them every time they bring it back.
Yeah, that's wild. No, I mean, overall, I guess, David, with some of the games, now, when you're getting rid of games, let's talk about the reverse side of it. When you're selling...
I don't, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you sell games that you don't
Only
like.
if I have a double.
Oh, really?
I'm just messing.
Okay, well, but it would be a game that you thought maybe, I got to have this game. Everybody's talking about it. You open it, you play it, you're like, what?
Blood
and
rage.
then, yeah,
Blood rage.
and then, give it you would sell it? I mean, is that the idea behind people who sellers?
I mean, I am the
like
collector, so as of right now, I haven't really sold any games yet. I'm starting to accumulate a shelf, though, of games that I could potentially sell. But for me, some of the board games, it's like a board game within a board game. I collect board games. I know some of you out there, you might feel the same way as I do. It's kind of like rare books. You kind of collect, and you want to have something. But I am getting to the point where my shelves are a little bit overflowing, and there are games that I really don't like, but they, for some reason, still have value for other people. So that's kind of where the rub is. It's like, I don't really like this game, but, an example I'll give is like Vindication. I recently played Vindication finally. It's been on my shelf forever. I've had this game. I got it used from somebody else. I've never got a chance to play it. I went to a buddy's house. We played it. I think you guys were there playing it with me.
Tough.
And, it was just tough. Maybe we didn't play it right, but the first go through was just really tough. And so, I have this game now with all the expansions and upgraded deluxe kind of copy. And now I'm like, should I get rid of it? The problem is I really like the artwork on the cover. So, sometimes you collect things for other reasons.
Okay.
So
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, to each their own type of... Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Until my wife makes me sell it.
Right.
Here I am.
Well, now let's just say, though, you have a game with Wonderland's War. You got the deluxeified version. You have just the regular game that came out. Will you sell the regular, or do you keep that in case you want to take it somewhere?
That is a question that I'm going to have to answer soon. But yes, I did get the deluxeified version with all the upgraded premium chips and stuff like that. And I do have the other one sitting right behind you on the shelf. So I might be looking to move it. I also think about gifting it sometimes, to somebody who I know could use a copy. I don't know. Sometimes it's not about the money. It's
Tax
about getting
write-off.
somebody in the hobby. So
yeah,
that's kind of where I stand sometimes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Tax write-off.
A gift.
Well, thank you guys for discussing that topic. If you guys have an opinion on if you've ever bought a used board game or not, maybe this could help persuade you to maybe go down that route if you've never bought a used game. I will say board gamers tend to take care of their stuff really well, especially in the modern kind of board game hobby. And you might meet some cool people while you do it. So give it a shot. Anyways, back to Daniela.
Yeah, I guess the only last thing I'd like to add, though, David, if people are looking for used, where would you suggest that they might go?
The first place I would suggest is Facebook Marketplace. Just look for it local, just because you save on shipping. But if you can't find it there, a lot of times you can go on BGG, like Chris was saying. You can find really good deals there, and a lot of people ship it for way cheaper than you think. Like I just got a game Container, which is really hard to find. Just got it shipped in from Washington, and it was like $9 to ship it, and it's a pretty big box.
Yeah.
That's what Maracaibo was for me. It was again,
It's crazy. I don't even know how they did that.
Yeah, $80 game. I got it for $25 and like $9 shipping.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Interesting. All right. Well, thanks, David. Those are our opinions on new or old buying of games. So we'd love to know all of what you guys think out there and what you guys have to say about this too. Did we get this right? Did we get it wrong? Obviously, both David and Chris think I got something wrong in there. So let us know by sending us an email at thefifthmeeple@gmail.com. And we also just invite you to take a second to hit the subscribe button so you never miss a show. We'd love to have you follow us on Instagram at Fifth Meeple, jump onto our BGG Guild, or check us out on our website at thefifthmeeple.com. Also, just want to make a special shout out and plea to ask all of you out there, if you're listening to us regularly, please rate us on Apple Podcasts and leave us a review. It's the most effective way to help us boost us in the podcast algorithms and get us a little bit more exposure. And of course, as always, we humbly thank you guys for listening. All right, we're going to take a really short break to fill our water bottles, but when we return, we'll get onto the topic of making a board game podcast. All right, guys, we are here talking about just the overall making of a podcast. Some of you guys might be interested in this topic, so we're going to just try to make it a little bit interesting, talk about some of our origins here, talk about how the inception of all this came together. So I'm going to kind of lead just David and Chris a little bit here because they really had the dream and the vision and the idea for this. So I guess starting at the top in the inception of board gaming, you guys both went to the Origins
Convention.
Okay, convention. Thank you. In Columbus, Ohio. And you guys are planning on going back there together. And really, Chris, I think you had brought this up in the car and David was like in tune with it as well. If you could just give us a little background on just the idea of how this all kind of came together in that car ride.
Yeah, David was actually the one that brought it up. He brought it up at a time when we were driving back from Origins. We had just spent the day there. And I had been thinking about it for a couple of days, maybe a couple of weeks ahead of that, hey, we should do a board game podcast. We potentially have what it takes to do that. And I'm driving back thinking, okay, how do I bring this up? Is it a dumb idea? Could I really do this? Because I have
You're a little high on the board gaming convention.
Exactly. Right. We hadn't eaten all day. I was like, maybe I'm just hallucinating. Right.
No breaks.
Exactly. And I'm thinking, okay, should I bring it up or not? It's going to sound dumb. And David brings it up, and I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. You know, it's like we were both thinking the exact same thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I was thinking about it probably a little bit prior to what, Chris had said. It's just something that was in my mind. I had listened to a lot of podcasts, not necessarily all board gaming podcasts, but the few that I had listened to, I was like, we could do this. And part of it was because we had a board game group that was meeting regularly for about, I want to say 6 months. I know Chris joined us a little bit later after that. But I thought we had what it takes because normally after we were done playing games, we normally would sit around and talk about that, that game for 30 or 40 minutes. And I was like, well, why don't we just record that and put it out there? Because I think it was better than half the stuff I was listening to currently. So I think that's kind of how it got started.
And there was kind of a need too, I think, there for both of you that you thought, hey, we're playing at 5 players. None of these other podcasts are really talking about 5-player games, right?
Yeah, that for me, I would go out and look if I knew we were going to be playing something. We always had 5 around the table at that point in time. And there's really no one out there at the time, and maybe still, that had concentrated on that. And so when we launched, we were doing that again to kind of fill that void that wasn't there.
Yeah,
and so
saw a
need. That was one of the conversations David and I had coming back to, hey, there's a lot of podcasts out there. What makes us different? And one of it was, well, we at least when we launched, we were coming at it from, hey, there's 5 of us. We're going to talk about it from that standpoint, but also just we were so different around the table. There were a couple of us who, David's been playing forever and is deep into it. I've been playing for a long time, but kind of came from just my own little, hey, Chris is coming out of the basement playing with other people right now.
He's emerging.
Yeah, and there were a couple of noobs in there, different levels of seriousness, different levels of experience. It was like we have a lot of different perspectives, and we all benefit from that as we're playing. Again, we felt like that perspective might actually be useful to others too. Yeah,
definitely. Just piggyback on what Chris was saying. We had, I think when we did the ages and just kind of like the generations too, we had 3 generations of gamers, playing consistently in our game group. And you don't see that every day. Most game groups that I'm a part of, people are normally around the same age. It just kind of, that's how you gravitate. You get there and you're like, oh, you look around the table and everybody's around the same age or in the same phase of life. And, I think we had something really unique coming from that perspective as well. So I think we had the ingredients for a good, board gaming podcast that was, like Chris said, something that hadn't been done before. And especially at a player count where it's always sometimes tricky to find games, that play well at that count.
Yeah, we had to use some expansions and do some other things too to kind of get that going. But I don't think there was a lot of convincing. I think when you guys brought that to the table, I think we were at, was it 4th of July? we had a picnic and we kind of brought it up, and you put it out there, and we kind of all like chewed on it a little bit. But when we kind of brought it back to the table, I think there wasn't, again, much convincing to do. I think we were all kind of like, yeah, this sounds good. We, like David said, we were talking about it. Like, let's get our mics and figure out what we're going to do and kind of go for it. So I think that helped the overall, the origins of the whole podcast. So
Yeah, I think on the way back we talked. Well, how do we bring this up? What if someone doesn't want to be in? How do we? Then what do we do? And yeah, there was none of that. It was okay. Yeah, how do we make it work?
Yeah,
right. And we just kind of went into what do we need? How would it be? And just started talking about format and again, what equipment.
Yes.
What does it look like?
Yeah.
How do we make it happen? How do we be relevant, et cetera? And,
exactly.
and everybody was on board right away.
Yeah, so I think going down that line, Chris, just the practicing we took, even trying to think of the beginning of this episode, I was going to Chris and I was like, oh, well, we played this, and this, and we talked about this game and this game. And Chris was like, no, those were all practice runs that we had done. And I completely forgot. My brain is just not working. So we did practice episodes, but our first publishing was of Isle of Cats and Planet Unknown. And like thinking back to that time is like, whoa, like it just feels like a lifetime ago, but also that was the middle of our podcasting journey. So it's really weird to think back though and think of that. But so yeah, we played around with practicing. We did a lot of that. We got our equipment, as we said. We have this Rodecaster that we purchased as a group, and we all got individual microphones, whatever we kind of looked into ourselves. And then we played around with different formats. What is this podcast going to entail? How do we want it to lay out? And I think we were all pretty good on the same level of, hey, at the end of this, let's find two like games that have kind of the same mechanisms, and let's put them against each other. And then we'll go around and say what we didn't like, and of each individual game, and then see who wins the battle of the funnest.
I think it's important what you mentioned there. We didn't just, okay, yeah, we're going to do it. And then the next week we were doing it.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just, okay, we got to figure out how to use all this equipment, but it was also, we wanted to put out good stuff. Right. And we didn't know how we'd do talking over each other, and everybody's in a microphone and all that. So yeah, we spent several weeks. All right, we're going to do a podcast. We're going to record it. We're going to practice editing it. We're going to listen to it. Was it any good? What can we learn from that? Oh, you guys talked over each other there. Oh, I can't hear this. And spent a couple of months trying to learn, okay, I want to put something out there good right off the bat.
Yeah, and I think that's important to do that practicing, because there are some people, like if you're turning your head away from your microphone, you're not talking into it, editing, getting the music to come in right. Like there's a lot of layers to it that it's not just like push the button and go and you're good. I mean, Chris, you've done a ton of editing and stuff for us lately. You know that, you know exactly what the ums look like now.
Yes, I know what the visual looks like in the recording software. I can see it coming.
So yeah, and it's important. I even say too, I think from the beginning of this, you can tell when somebody's smiling and when they're not smiling. You can tell when people are having a good time, when they're not having a good time. And no matter what, like you definitely have to show up, put on a smile, and get through it. And I think that's the tenacity that you need to get through a podcast too. All right, so that's kind of just the beginning origins, kind of what we dove into and what happened. So then there was a moment too where we had been doing this for a little bit, and then something changed. So I'll just say, we were on a roll. We were going through this. We had mapped out what we were going to do, how the podcasts were going to look, what we were doing it. And, unfortunately for, I think, our group, a little bit of it changed from, we were playing consistently every Monday. We were coming together. We were playing games. We were getting them out on the table. We were just having a great time. We're talking offline about what we were doing and if we liked the game and not, and all the mechanisms of it. And then it was like a little bit of a change from play to business, right? And so it was a little bit of, I think, duty got in the way. I think a little bit of personalities differed, roles and responsibilities kind of weighed a little bit heavily. You saw a little bit of a shift, right? So when you take something that's a hobby and you're trying to make it a little bit more of a passion, and you're trying to make it something that goes a little bit beyond, there's responsibilities, there's roles and responsibilities. And I'm not going to say anybody forego their responsibilities, but there's also schedules and vacations. And Chris, you travel for work sometimes, and that gets heavy. David, you were just out of town for 2 weeks. Like there's life. Like I'll just say that life sometimes gets in the way a little bit, and it causes a little hiccups. But for us three, I'll say there was a little bit of a push to just say, listen, let's keep doing this. Like we're enjoying it. We had two of our fellows leave the podcast, and that's fine. They made the choice that was best for them at the time. But I think it's a lot about too, hey, when things aren't going right, how are you pushing through? So, I'll kind of open that up too, is about just maybe something of the things that you saw that maybe changed.
I want to start by saying that when that change happened, I will say it couldn't have come at a worse time where we had we spent a lot of time trying to understand. Again, we want to put a good product out there, but we also want it to be successful. We want to be able to catch on. And I had happened shortly before that to have made a comment and left a review for Board Game Hot Takes, which I listen to a lot. I know David listens to a lot. Really a fan of that podcast. And it was one of the podcasts that inspired me to say, man, that sounds like fun. I'd like to do that too. We can bring some value. And I had left a comment that that they inspired us to launch this podcast, and they were gracious enough to give us a listen and to give us a shout out on their show. And when they did, we can see our listener count and all that, and we saw a boost. And we said, okay, that was, again, incredibly fortunate, really thankful to them. We saw that boost, and then literally like a week later, all heck broke loose with respect to our podcast changing and things changing internally. And it was a great moment going to a really tough moment, all within a very short period.
I mean, it was devastating to what we were doing in our momentum, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's tough. I do think there was definitely a crossover. I don't even know exactly how to pinpoint it, but I think the communication that this group had was really good for a long time. And I think some stuff, like, everybody has a different personality. And I think those personalities, some people are very much, going to say what they feel, and other people are going to bury that until it becomes an issue, and then out of nowhere, they're going to kind of burst on the scene and say, this is now an issue, and you're like, I didn't know that was an issue, and now it's a big problem, and
I can't fix that.
Yeah, and I think that's what a little bit happened with our group in particular, is that it did become like a business thing, and then also I think certain people, we had roles and kind of responsibilities like Danielle was talking about, and I think certain people, I think everybody to an extent, some people started stepping over, what their role was in the group, when we first created the group. And I think, that led to some hard feelings on different sides. And then also just because the roles and responsibilities are not always equal as far as time is concerned either.
Correct.
And so I think some people thought they were doing more than others. And I think when you have 5 people in a podcast, I know why there's not many that are out there that have 5 people now, because I think it's very hard to get 5 people in a room to talk about something at the same time, and with the conflicts in life, like you were talking about, happens, I definitely saw that take place where, once we're just playing games, but now, we're having to find time to not only play games that we love to do, but also time to podcast. And so for us, I feel like maybe looking back on it, I didn't know personally, like how much time the podcast was going to take and trying to play the games that we all like to play. And I think those two things rubbed up against each other, leading to just finding it hard to record, or like we'd have to sacrifice game time to record to make this podcast happen, because some of us started getting more of a passion for one or the other, I think, or maybe both, and some of us were like, I wish we just board gamed more and just not podcast as much, because it was eating into how many games we got to play. And so I think that was part of that discussion.
And I think what you're saying, you touched on a good point about when we started going through games and playing games that, hey, some of us didn't really like some of the games, right? And we were going down this thing. And I think at the beginning of what we were bringing to the table before this podcast happened, we were playing a lot of games, and there's a little bit of, I didn't really like that, or, whatever. But I've always come from the place of, I want to play it a couple times. I mean, you guys all know the games out there I played once, and I'm like, I'm never going to play that again. Like, right, Chris?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, okay. And so there's
Vindication?
Well, that Blood Rage, there's a number out there.
Oh, we're playing Blood Rage again.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I agree. We definitely got to play those again. But there also comes a time, I think, in the podcast and in this world where you need to be open to playing games that you don't like. And if you're going to come to a game night or whatever and know that there is a game and you're just like, oh, I don't want to play that because I don't like the mechanisms or something on that. Again, you have to be a little bit pliable and open to playing games, and you're not always going to like what's brought to the table. Should you make a stink of it and never play a game? No. I mean, like, how do you get better at any game? I will openly say, when we were playing trick-taking games, I was just like, I do not want to play any of these games anymore. I don't want to play this roll and write, this cartographers. I don't like this. I don't like that. Blah. And then at some point it kind of like hits you in the face, and you're just like, no, you got to play games you don't like all the time.
At the same time, Daniela, when we were doing all that planning in that first couple of months, we knew that was going to be the case. And so we called out.
It wasn't a surprise.
Right. We had an agreement. You're going to have to play games you don't like. You're going to have to play games maybe more than you want to every once in a while to make sure that we can speak intelligently about the games.
And I think that came to a boiling point. Yeah. That came to a place where it was like, I don't want to play this game. I don't like it. I don't have fun, blah, blah, blah. And it was just like, wait, what? So again, David had kind of alluded to a little bit of the blindsiding. So
yes, I think that's exactly some of what happened. I think that's just tough with any group. If you get into something and you do it because we're playing games more that we like, and then now, to me, it was a big cut down on time, because if we're podcasting on a night and we're recording an episode, we're trying to still get a game in sometimes that same night. And so instead of playing that 2-hour game that a lot of us might like, we're playing like a 45-minute real kind of intro level game that some of us at the game table started, I think, gravitating against wanting to play. And so because of that, I think you saw some friction as well of, what games were we actually playing now versus what we actually sometimes like to play, if we have the time to do it. So
yeah. Well, I think that's the high level of it. I will say, if you are thinking about doing a podcast and you have kind of like a leader in the group, I think it's good to have other people be able to speak into that. But from the beginning, I think I will say there should have been probably 2 leaders. We had a little bit too many leaders in there. So think about that. If you are going to start it as a podcast or any type of business, I would say keep it to be like yourself as the main person, or just 2 if there's, a multiple people a part of that business or something, because you need 1 to 2 front seat drivers and not 8 backseat drivers trying to control what's going on. So just have a vision and get that out there and let those people lead. And if the people behind you want to jump onto that and want to be a part of that vision, great. Then it moves forward. So I think that helps too. And you guys spent time putting together a vision and thinking of what it was going to be. And, some things have deviated a little bit, but we've grown and we've learned through that. And I think that was important. All right. Well, I think let's get on to some of these larger topics to consider. I think our first topic that we'd like to talk about is really just time. When you're doing a podcast, there's everything you got to go through. You got to go through pre-prep. You're going to do the actual podcast. So what's going on during it? You've got what comes after the podcast and stuff like that. And just really just the work-life balance. So let's talk about pre-prep. So there is a lot of planning. There is a lot of phasing. There's grouping. There's playing. A lot of this stuff has to come out. Any thoughts on planning, phasing, the grouping of the games that we went through? Some of the, again, David kind of hit on playing the games. Some games are 45 minutes. Others, like, what did Barrage take us the first time?
It was like 5 hours or something like that.
Too long. Yeah. So, we went through some of that, and you start talking through some of these games and trying to play them, and it's like, oh, man, you get a little crunch for time.
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing that changed with our group was the amount of prep. A lot of it was, I was teaching games. I know Chris was teaching games when we came in here, but
I was not.
When we started going to a board game podcast, a lot of it was, hey, here's a video, go study before you come, because when you come now on game night, our time is really crunched. So the teaches became more condensed, and, we were expecting you to kind of do, watch some how to play videos and stuff before you actually came to the table. Maybe even play it on Board Game Arena, get acclimated to it. So when we come, we can actually play and not have to spend a whole lot of time teaching. We'll do a quick teach, but it wasn't like a full kind of in-depth like we were doing. And I think people don't understand that, because a lot of people, they're like, well, I would never prep for a game. But I know Daniela, like, there's videos out there, and I know sometimes it was like, I don't really want to watch this, I keep falling asleep. But, in order to kind of, make best use of our time, a lot of that had to happen. And so, that was tough for some people in the group. Others of us, like me, I was watching stuff anyways and, trying to learn the game so I could teach it. So to me, it wasn't as big a deal, but I think it became a bigger deal to other people as it ate into their time.
Yeah, for sure. And that is like, 'cause some of those teachers can be, 45 minutes to an hour long, especially if you watch a playthrough or something like that. But there's quite a few good YouTube channels out there too, where you can find a really good teach and lesson. So some of it was about that too. I think when the one game we struggled for was Heat, wasn't it? That we couldn't find like a really good teach on that. So if anybody has a good teach for that game, please go put it up. Or Rallyman Dirt.
That's because you don't.
Rallyman Dirt was one that you couldn't find. Even
that was it. Rallyman Dirt.
Couldn't even find a rule book anywhere.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah. So
the interesting thing, there's a lot of work that goes in before you get to the podcast, right? And that's kind of what we're talking about now. And part of it is what we just talked about, the fact you got to play the game. And ideally, you're playing it multiple times, because we want to be able to speak intelligently and talk about how things change from your first couple of plays. I love to discover a game, and you finish the first game, and then you play the second and the third, and then after a number of plays, now you can say, here's what I really think of that game. But there's also the fact, we don't just show up and start talking. We plan out the episode. What are we going to say here? You'll hear board game descriptions. So for my part, I put together, how do you describe how to play the game? in enough detail to where it makes at least a little bit of sense, or can get okay, this is what they're talking about, but not so much detail
like
that you're just tired of hearing Christopher or Chris talk, and you're just like, okay, move on and start talking about it. That takes some time. It takes some iterations. But for me, that's still fun doing. It's an acknowledgement that, but it takes time.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And any of the 10-word alliterations you've heard have come from Chris.
Yeah. But again, I have a lot of fun doing that. It's just a matter, okay, today I'm not going to do this because I'm going to do
I've definitely texted him like, I'm not saying that. So yeah, there's some funny things. You gotta say things in your own voice too, which is always funny. So and really too I think we spent time grouping games, right? Finding out which games kind of could have been faced off against each other.
Yeah, a lot of what we started doing was taking, a newer game that has mechanisms that's similar to a game that's been popular maybe, but it's not new. It's like one of the, games that people, when they think of a mechanic, they're like, it's that game that you should play first, and I think we tried to compare some of the classics, I call them the OGs, to some of the newer stuff that was trying to take their titles. And I think our show became more about that as it got progressively down the road, trying to compare, what's good about, something that might have started that category versus something that is currently everybody thinks about or is wanting to play. So we try to keep a good perspective on what's hot right now, but also what's a classic. And then I think, part of it too is, do we actually own those games? That comes into it as well. So
a great example of prep is what Danielle and I spent, 15, 20 minutes doing before this podcast was, okay, let's make a list of some of the games that we said, hey, we're familiar with these games. We can speak about them. We need to find a match for him, and just doing that.
Yeah.
Now David's one of his roles. Again, we all have different roles. David's like, okay, what's the hot game?
Yeah, where's your list at?
It's on the drive. Yeah. No, I mean, and I think getting to this point though, like, so I'll talk about during now. So during the podcast, this is the fun part. This is the easy part. This is the part we come together, we can sit around, we can laugh, we're looking at each other, and we're going through games. We agree on stuff, we disagree on stuff. And a lot of that comes out here because we're not really prepping together. We did today a little bit, just going through some of the topics, but we're hearing David's, his discussion points for the first time that day. We're talking about, hey, how's somebody going to vote on a Battle of the Funnest? Yeah. So we're trying to figure out what we're going to do there. And I will say, like, the during is, I would say, the easiest phase for the overall podcast.
It's the easiest and definitely fun. And a lot of the things we are hearing for the first time, right? We go through that Battle of the Funnest having absolutely no idea. Definitely what the other people are going to vote. Sometimes I don't even know what I'm going to vote, and more my vote changes partway through because I hear something. Oh my gosh, that's a great, that's a great point.
Yeah,
so definitely I think the actual doing of the podcast is what everybody probably thinks. Oh yeah, doing a podcast, that's what I want to do. That's
sitting
the fun
around
part.
my friends. Yeah,
and it is. It's the great part. It's just, hey, there's a lot of work before and after. But it's as long as this continues to be fun, it's like, okay, well, still worth it to me.
Yeah.
And you have to grind. I mean, for those of you, who are listening to this podcast thinking about starting it, it's a lot of fun, but I think, you definitely do hit a wall. Like you come off that euphoria of like, oh, we're finally published. I remember the first time seeing our podcast on Apple Podcasts, which I listen to most of my podcasts on. I was like, we have a show. Like, I could text people like we're legit. And I remember that great feeling, and I think that sometimes, like kind of Chris and Danielle were alluding to, it does kind of wane, sometimes when you're seeing the numbers come back and you're seeing the viewership and all that kind of things, it gets to be a grind, but you have to tell yourself sometimes, like, sometimes you don't want a podcast necessarily, but you're like, we're going to do it because we know the reward on the other side will be great. So, it's just like training for anything. The goal, what is the end goal?
Yeah. And I mean, for full transparency, today we're recording because Chris has a very heavy work schedule that he has coming up. I all throughout the day had a migraine, blah, blah, blah. I came home, I lay down on my couch and I'm like, all right, like, what do you guys want to do? You guys want to record tonight? Like, so we're here doing it because this takes precedence. So Chris has time to do the editing, right? And so sometimes there is that sacrificial thing that you just have to go through and have the perseverance just to get through and get it done. So, again, that takes a certain kind of personality. I'm not patting myself on the back or anything, but again, for the sake of unity to do this and get through it, you have to do it. So then Chris doesn't have a day to edit and we all sound stupid.
And we don't even get to play a board game tonight. Yeah. So there it is.
So sacrificial there. So
it is sacrificial. Yeah.
And then, touching on, I guess, after this podcast is done, Chris has to take this lug of a Roadcaster little doohickey thing home. We all pack up our mics. We pack up everything that we take with us and take it to and from David's house. And Chris has the arduous job of taking this and editing it. And there's a lot of work to do that. We could end up on some, I'll say, podcasts going on, kind of throwing it out there, like an hour and a half, right? And you whittle it down to maybe you take 10, 20 minutes out of some of that stuff and have to go through.
Yeah, typically
and
depending
listen
on
to my voice
depending
10,000
on
times.
That's the best part. Yeah. Typically our recordings are anywhere from an hour and 10 to an hour and 30, but yeah, most of our shows end up being between an hour and hour and 10. And yeah, it's all that editing out, some of which is obvious, but a lot of which isn't. And yeah, for an hour show, it can be anywhere from 3 to 6 hours of editing for me. Because at a minimum, you have to listen to the whole thing, right? So at a minimum, it's going to be an hour and a half.
Yeah.
But then you're cutting pieces out. And a lot of times, the things that you don't think about when we're recording, I just got halfway through a sentence, I'll just pick it off right there. Well, that's all well and good, but then I got to make it sound good.
Yeah.
And I got to find the exact spot where, okay, you just finished that word, and then you mess something up and you start it again, and I gotta get all those cuts right. And sometimes it's easy, and sometimes it's not. And then because I want to put a decent product out there, we say a lot, we say a lot, and I try to cut as many of those out as I can to make a decent podcast, but it's a lot of work. And that's work that I didn't have when we were 5. Yeah. Now I have it that we're 3.
Right. And that's a good point because you were not editing prior to. You were doing a lot of scripts. You're doing a lot of the beginnings of the intro of the games and stuff like that. And so now a lot of that had fallen onto you. And it's a time suck, right? I mean, you're an empty nester right now, and so it's just you and your wife, and you have to take more time to do that type of thing as well. I know. I would say for like myself, the social media aspect was taken care of prior to this. I'm not on Facebook, so that kind of went away. I know we're talking about maybe relaunching that page here soon, but I took over a lot of the Instagram stuff. And I was just having this conversation with Chris on the side before of just how like Instagram is just so it's just a cesspool sometimes of just the comments and things that people say, not necessarily in board games, just in everyday interactions on social media. And it's hard to get on a platform and give it time and give it effort and make the graphics for things and be engaging when you just have no passion for that social media aspect of it. I mean, we do it. I tried to the best of my ability to do that, but it takes time to make the graphic. And then you'll see our Meeple Madnessing that we went through. I totally got the seedings wrong for the graphic that we
for
did.
The bracket, yeah.
For the bracket.
Somebody let you have it for that. So.
Yeah. So I
really?
just sat
I did
here.
not know that this happened.
I just sat here with Chris and redid the finals, which is fine. Okay. The finals is great. So that'll be posted here soon now that we just finished the last of the March Madness final stuff here. But again, it's another aspect that I think a couple of us didn't have prior to that has been put onto us that maybe we didn't realize or appreciate before how much time it was taken. And now it's on 3 of us, it's a lot. It's a lot more work than you think it is.
Yeah, the after, we've talked about the before, the during, the after. The during is definitely the most fun. The before is work, but it's building up to the during, and so it's a lot of fun. The after is just work, right? It's just this is what's keeping us from getting it out there and getting that rush of seeing the next one out there. And there's not a whole lot fun about the after.
Thanks for making it sound good, Chris.
Well,
this is why we let you in so much. I mean, honestly, no, it's just messing.
No, overall, just the whole work-life balance, I think, really kind of just shocked us after some of the split happened. So know what you're kind of getting into. Know that you have to take some time. You're going to have time to edit. You got to have time to do the social media presence. You got to have time to do scripts and all that kind of stuff. So it's not just, again, getting together and doing the fun part of it. So if you want a good product and you want to put it out there, try and do that and just be mindful of it. So let's get into cost overall of the podcast. So, there's a lot of things that we have to do. Equipment, I'll say we have, again, this Rodecaster that was quite a bit of money, but I think we chose that because it was all encompassing of what we needed for 5 different plugs and outlets to go in for 5 microphones and 5 sets of headphones. So we had that. You can mix on it. You can add noises and voices and a whole myriad of things. So I don't know if either of you want to talk about that, but we again bought that. We all have our own microphones. We all have our own headphones. And that's really, I would say, the equipment startup, aside from all the games that David has.
We have so many capabilities that we never use.
Wow. That was incredible. Dude, yeah, like a little evil laugh.
Where is Chris? And anyways, somebody came and took him over.
The Eldritch Horror.
But yeah, I would say that there's definitely a cost to doing it. I know people do podcasts differently. You know, as a group, we decided very early on that we were going to make a LLC just in case we happen to take off, which, you know, that'd be great. But if we don't, everything's kind of protected because we were pooling our money to buy assets for the podcast to begin with. And we just wanted to make sure we did it in a way that, you know, everybody, it was fair. But because we did it in such a way of that, there are costs, you know, of, you know, starting up a business, you know, because that's basically what we tried to do, is start up a media company. And so, you know, there are costs, you know, we have to do taxes on that, you know, and other stuff that, you know, you might not think about.
A bank account.
Yeah, a bank account. We have a bank account for the business that's separate from, you know, any of our stuff. And so, you know, a lot of what, you know, goes into all of that, you know, is sometimes behind the scenes, but it is a big part of it. And, you know, one of the expenses that, you know, we don't have to do, and, you know, if you're thinking about starting your own board game podcast, is, you know, the game part. You know, fortunately for us, a lot of the games, you know, I own a lot of games, and for those that we couldn't find that we wanted to use on the podcast, you know, we do have great friends that, you know, own other games that, you know, we can get our hands on and they let us borrow to record and stuff like that. So, but yeah, there are a lot of hidden costs, you know, just hosting for the website, you know. We have fifthmeeple.com. If you've never been there, you know, it redirects to our podcasts. We had to pay for podcast hosting, and then, you know, we have to beam it up, and there's just a lot of costs. I mean,
there's like a startup cost, I'll say, but reoccurring costs.
Yeah, there's
too.
reoccurring costs too. Yeah, that we'll get yearly for just making sure the podcast is online, so you can all listen to it anytime you want.
Yeah, to me, that's just something to be aware of, right? We're aware of it going in, and I'd say that the biggest thing was, okay, getting the Rodecaster. We probably got more than we needed, but now we have it. We had to each buy our own microphones. You talked about the LLC, talked about the website, and then it's just a matter of, the recurring piece of that. To me, as long as it's fun, it's okay, right? Yeah. I often think, you know, people talk even just about the price of board games, but you look at what the price of going to a movie now or doing any kind of, going to a sporting event is hugely expensive. And a board game you can continue to play over and over again. This is something we're continuing to use. As long as it's fun, I'm okay with that cost. It's just be aware, if you're going to launch one, there are costs associated with it.
Well, for the solar eclipse that we just had, parking downtown was $80 a car. So you could probably get a really expensive game for that, or two smaller games for that.
I parked my butt in my yard. It didn't cost me anything.
See, there you go. Yeah.
I was charging parking for my yard. No,
yeah.
it just wasn't.
Yeah. And I think the overall, you guys probably both have dinners and dates you got to take your wives out to for the time it takes away from.
That's the actual hidden cost.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So hidden costs in there as well. Little gifts that you can bring home.
You guys are recording again tonight? Yeah, I guess I'm going to the florist afterwards too.
There you go. At least you're mindful of it, so that's great. All right. So there's some costs in that. And I would just say the next thing that let's talk about is just the presence in the board gaming community. For me, I'm new to this, way newer than Chris and David both are. You know, David has, I feel like, a whole separate community and a network of connections where he's either getting games from or buying them from, or he's going out to different places to play games. Chris has really broken into that too, I think, a little bit more, and going out and playing with just different gaming groups and stuff like that. But to me, coming in and again doing some of more of the social media aspect of it, like breaking into that social media aspect, or I'll even just say getting listens on our published podcasts, trying to understand that algorithm and trying to understand, hey, what's hitting. We're even talking recently about, hey, do we need to add this word to make sure people are knowing that we're a board game podcast so people can find us? And how do we do that? And how do we get the clicks? And how do we know all that? And maybe some of you guys are algorithm geniuses and you understand all that and you know about the clicks and all that kind of stuff. But I find that to be very difficult. I was even talking to David and Chris about on Instagram, you can set your business company profile up to be, either a product or a business or something like that. And I'm like, well, do I need to change this to gaming? And Chris goes, well, that could potentially mean video gaming. And so there's a lot. If anybody honestly has recommendations, I will take them all day and read through them just to be able to get kind of viewership. But I do notice on Instagram, the people who are putting out content, they're putting out really good stuff, but I can't even imagine how much time they're spending on that. Like literally going through a game, playing a game, taking videos, putting it in a reel, making sure it all goes together, putting it on TikTok, putting it on here. Like that is a lot. That's a full-time content creator job.
Yeah, do you remember when we used to joke about, oh, we should start a YouTube video channel while we do this? And I was like,
I don't think
should
that was
we
a
still
joke.
do
That was a
that?
good. Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember, yeah.
Well, because I never heard of, like, not that I never heard of, but I think a lot of the podcasts I was thinking of, people have options. So you can either watch it on YouTube or you listen to it. And David's like, I've never watched a podcast in my life on YouTube. I've always listened to them while you're out doing yard work or mowing the lawn or, doing other things. So yeah, that was a difference. That was something new. And I'm glad because you would see a hot mess sitting here right now. So I'm really glad for that. So.
We have to deal with it, but you should.
Yeah, smell my armpit.
Yeah, the reality is none of us are social media geniuses. None of us are sitting there looking like, oh, we want to be super influencers or anything like that. We just want to put out content and engage with the community. But what that means is, yeah, we don't understand how this algorithm works. Why, when you search for board games, do we not come up?
Yeah.
And other things that come up are like, why in the heck is that coming up? And we have to really work to find ourselves. So we're still trying to figure that out. But again, we're not social media gurus.
Well, and really after the whole debacle that we had, like with our group, we plummeted. We just and why did that happen? It's like, I know why we happened because a lot of our stuff got pulled off and things like that. But we've really struggled to come back in our listenership numbers. We're getting there. We're getting a little bit better. Every week is, going better. But we lost a lot of old content. We lost probably a lot of followers. Like something happened where it just hit you. And really, you can get shadow banned. You can get a number of other things that can happen that is just beyond your control, that you may lose everything. You could get demonetized. Not that we're monetizing anything right now, but there's a lot that can happen. And so it's a really seedy thing to have to deal with.
Yes, I do think that hurt, definitely, for those of you who don't know, there was a lot of content of ours that got deleted for a short while. And then, we were able, thank goodness, to recover a lot of our files and put them back on. But, the bottom line is, all those views and all those listens to, I don't know if they affect the algorithm, but that all disappeared, and the new episodes, even we posted the old episodes back on, they don't now have that history of being there, and so I think that definitely, hurt, us in the algorithm outtake as far as like even how long our podcast has been there, and now it's only, we only have episodes recorded for, 3 months instead of 8 months or whatever the case was. But I also think that, like they were both talking about, I tend not to be a social media person either. And I'm on there a little bit just to interact with some friends, mostly to see other people's pictures, I guess, of their families and what they're doing. But, I'm more of the Stone Age. Danielle was telling you guys about, me going out to other game groups and, trying to network through all those things. I kind of just, tell one person at a time about the podcast. It probably is not helping viewership much because it's like, oh, we went from 101 to 102. Okay. But that's kind of how I do it. I'm kind of in the Stone Age. I network a lot. We have game groups that we run and that we go to. And, I just try to connect with people there. And if they ask, I tell them. I'm not always advertising Fifth Meeple podcast yet, unless Chris makes a shirt soon. And then I'll wear the shirts everywhere I go. But, silent advertising. But
David's like the count. He's like, 1, I go.
Yeah, exactly. So
Shirts are coming.
I know.
You find them at the convention.
Yeah, we lost our Gen Z or whatever, and so we need somebody that's rocking social media again.
Yeah, tough. Well, I think, kind of just to wrap up overall with the podcast, let's just talk about the fun that we do have. Overall, playing games, I've talked about before. I've talked about cartographers. I've talked about different games that I'm like, I never want to play that again. But if you really are coming to the table and you have an open mind with a lot of this stuff, you're learning so much. My views have changed on different games that had mechanisms that I did not like at all when we first started. I'm starting to win a little bit, you guys, and everybody listening. Tap, tap, tap. I've been winning a couple of games. I'm on a roll. So yeah, knock, knock, knock. But no, it's when you start to hit that and things start to click and you're starting to pick up on games. It's been over a year for me. It's been 16 months since I first probably started gaming. And it takes that long to really start to understand things. Give yourself time, give yourself some chances to lose, and I always say be okay with that. I don't even know like what we're talking about half the time we're playing in games, but you can't just say, I will say, coming into board gaming, just an overall and with the podcast, you can't just say, well, I don't like space, I'm not going to play that game. Like, what? you have to be open to playing different things. You got to have an open mind. You may not like the theme, but maybe you really like the whole game and how it played out. You may not like, I don't know, again, the mechanism on it, but then when you win or get closer, you get second place on a game, you're like, oh, okay, like I could do that again. So I think just overall the fun of podcasting and where it really started was the inception of these games, and really just being open to, we talk about games and the things that we do and don't like in them, or not even don't like, the things that frustrate us. Because I don't think we've ever come out and just completely bashed a game yet. No, just kidding. But take your time, enjoy the ride. If this is something you're passionate about and you like to do, and you think you have a shot at it, why not take the chance for it?
I mean, I think, one of the reasons why I wanted to start a board game podcast was just so, one of the things is, it's something that I love doing. I have a passion for it. And just to have something that maybe, I have one kid right now, she's only 10 months old. But, as I have kids, maybe they'll be like, oh, I'm going to listen to some of my dad's old podcasts, when he did that. I think knowing that I'm leaving something behind, even if I were to go away tomorrow, die, unfortunately, there's something that's out there still that I produce with you guys that they can go back and listen to. And I feel like there's not a lot of that, and so some of it plays into like legacy for me is, what am I doing? How was my dad when, he was this age, they can go back and kind of see what I did, some of the cool aspects, I wasn't really boring. I wasn't uncool. I actually did semi-cool things, hopefully. But, to me, that all is in what I'm trying to create and, hopefully draw other people into the podcast as well, or into the board gaming community and, find out really what it's all about. It's about that community, that sense of belonging, where you can come in, you can hang out with people and find common ground. And I feel like in society today, that's a hard thing to do, is finding common ground with people. Sure. And so to me, it's like, I like to board game with people. We might have different aspects on what we think about life in general, but when I sit down at the table with them, hopefully we can find common ground. We can play a game, have fun together, and know that our differences aren't always so different that can keep us apart. And so that's kind of, why I'm in this, and kind of, what board gaming's done to me, and kind of how the communities that I'm in, I try to be a positive influence on those things.
I think that's actually really beautiful. So I think that's great.
Yeah, now I have to follow that.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah.
Chris, what's your legacy?
Yeah, no, it's not a legacy.
Well, listen, David will pay the hosting fees for the rest of his life.
I know your daughter's listening.
and I guarantee she is. And that's one of the things I love about her.
Hey, Julia.
That she listens. No, for me, I think it's all part of the evolution of what I've been going through in life and in my gaming experiences. I think I've talked before, and I've shared with you all that yeah, for a lot of years, I loved games and wasn't able to get the experience because I'm the introvert.
Right.
It's hard for me to get out. And just this group was such a blessing for me and again, it's just funny how things worked out to where I just happened to meet David, wasn't even going to go, decided to go. He walks in at the right time. Next thing you know, just like a couple of weeks after, I'm saying, man, I wish I could figure out how to get into a board gaming group. I'm in a board gaming group. It's like, how did that happen?
Yeah. And really on the right side of town too.
Correct.
Because a lot of people on the west side.
Right. Yeah. Just down from, not far from where I work, not far from where I live. And so the way that worked out, and the other thing is I'm 51 years old, and I'm as you get older, you do start to say, well, gee, what are the things that I just need to start experiencing some other things. And so when I say, boy, I might want to try to do a podcast, I think we can have fun. Then okay, let's try it, and to be able to do it with a group where I truly do have fun. When I'm sitting around this table, I'm enjoying life.
Yeah, we're razzing each other. It's fun.
but all fun. It's just I look forward to doing this, and it to me, it's just part of experiencing life in a way that I wasn't doing before, that I'm able to do because I have this group of friends that I'm really it's a gift to have, right?
Yeah,
so
truly.
So to me, I'm pleased as all get out that we launched this, and as long as I'm having fun, I want to continue to do it. Because it's an experience in life that if it's something that you think you might want to try and you're willing to put in the work, there's a lot of fun that comes along with it too. Yeah,
you may not get the most content out of us, again, because we all have lives. We all have really, I think we're all really high up in our companies and things like that. But what we can produce and what we will produce is hopefully going to be of really good to excellent quality. And I think that's important for us because I think we all strive to put that out there for sure.
And hopefully it's fun too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think what you guys have both touched on though is extremely important. I think I'll just gonna kind of wrap that up too, just with the whole community aspect of it. I think it's funny. I think David, you had told us a story. You know, your wife had said at one point, you need to go find like some friends and you need to go do something. You need to do something besides work. And you know, you have quite a few businesses and you're very involved in that. And it's funny, like. You did find that immediately. Yeah. And I think, Chris, for you too, again, it's another just like answer to prayer of just, hey, I like doing this. How do I do that? And then David, walks into the room and it's like.
Well, it's funny you say that about Dwight too, because my wife would always say, you go out and find some friends. And I was like, you going out with your friends again? I'm like, well, yeah.
Yeah, so both
I think
of you
I have more friends than her now.
Yeah. So that's funny. No, I think it's really cool. I think it's awesome how it's all come together. And again, hopefully we can just keep producing content for you guys and you'll stick around with us and we'll try and do this as long as we possibly and humanly can. And hopefully it doesn't take the better out of us. But I think we're all just very blessed and grateful to be here and have the friends that we do. So any other final thoughts just overall on podcasting, anybody?
I would just say in general in life, just put yourself out there, try something. Even if you fail, it'll be worth it because you'll learn from that. I think too many people are just afraid to do things. And I think the conversation going back to the very start of it, having it in the car with Chris, I remember having some of the same thoughts. I'm like, well, what if I say this? And Chris was just like, this is a terrible idea. Like, why would you even bring that up? But, just putting yourself out there sometimes because you don't know what the other person's thinking. And maybe you guys are thinking the same thing. And, if nobody says anything, maybe, we wouldn't be here today. And so part of it is, sometimes when you don't want to do something, force yourself to step out there. It'll be worth the experience. Even if it's a bad one, you can learn from it and hopefully it won't kill you. So, yeah.
Yeah, for me, it's just if it's something that you aspire to or something you think you might want to try that you'd enjoy, give it a shot. Do a little bit of research, ask some questions. Don't be afraid to ask people. Again, especially in the board gaming world where I've got to tell you, the people are just, in general, very, very welcoming. There's always exceptions to every rule. But for the most part, people are it's a really nice crowd.
Yeah.
And if they know, they're gonna answer your question. If not, then you just go on and ask somebody else. But give it a shot.
Yeah, we've met some really great people through board gaming, so it's been a fun experience to go through a lot of it. I think the final thought I have is if you guys are going to Origins, hit us up. Let us know that you're going. David and Chris will both be there. I will be on vacation this year during that time, but I can't wait to see kind of like what they come back with and the experiences that they have, and hopefully network with some more other podcasters. If you guys are out there, link up, say hi to them. They'll be wearing their Fifth Meeple hats and t-shirts. I don't know what they're going to wear. So
hopefully t-shirts.
Yeah,
we'll be there Wednesday to Saturday, and I think registration for actual events starts like May 4th or something. I put it on my calendar.
There you go.
Good. Nice.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, I think that leads us to our final thought for the day, and that is, while we'll still be putting out podcasts, you may see just a difference in cadence for us in posting and podcasting. We really want to enjoy what we're doing, and to do that, we need to make sure we do have the best content to put out there for our listeners. We hope you all enjoyed this podcast and continue to follow and engage with us. If there's anything you've really liked that we've done, please let us know so we can keep doing that. Or if there's something you'd like to see us try, put that up there too. Let us know. So hope you guys have a great rest of the week and enjoy. Out. Yeah, Chris, duty. Say it. Archipelago.
What?
Stop touching that.
I can't help it. Yeah, but I was gonna make a point. I can't believe it. After smell my armpit, I lost all train of thoughts.
Hopefully we're not boring.